Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Dziedzic. I'm the Director of Curatorial Affairs here at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. I want to thank everyone for transitioning over to or moving to virtual. This program was originally intended to be at the museum, so as things go during this kind of interesting time that we live in, we're moving virtual using the kind of tools that we have set ourselves up for over the past few years. So thanks for being flexible with us. I'm really excited tonight. This is our final program in conjunction with 5 Years and Counting, expanding the permanent collection at the Kemper Museum. It's an exhibition that I curated with our assistant curator, Krista Alba. And it really looks at about the last 5 years of collecting at the Kemper Museum, a selection of works from our permanent collection. It's on view now until January 8th, 2023. So if you have a chance over the holidays to visit us at the museum, I encourage you to do so. There's a lot more than what you'll see here tonight. I want to thank Karen and Jack Holland for supporting our visiting artist program. They make it possible for us to have programs like this, whether we have it on site or virtual. I want to thank Judy O'Kirk for being a supporter of the 5 Years and Counting exhibition. I also want to thank our members and docents and volunteers for all of their support that they give the museum every year. I know we love being there, and it's really wonderful to see the energy and all of the great programming that's done at the museum for free, and everybody having a chance to enjoy educational programming that's free, that's fun, and get to learn a little bit as well as spend a little bit of time in the mind of some artists. And tonight we're going to spend inside the mind a little bit of collectors and museum curators, and learn a little bit more about how to bring work into the museum's collection, the different ways that we do that, and some of the things and the philosophies that we think about. So I want to welcome Bill Gautreaux and JoAnne Northrup this evening. Bill Gautreaux and his wife, Christy, have been collecting for over 20 years. They are both on the board of many organizations in and around Kansas City. Bill is on several creative community and museum boards, including the Kemper Museum and the Nelson Atkins Museum, one of the top collectors in the United States. We had the pleasure of organizing the exhibition Piece by Piece, which looked at their private collection and building aspects of it several years ago at the Kemper Museum. Bill and Christy have also been incredibly generous to the museum in gifting some signature works that are included in this particular show. So he will be speaking with us about collecting from a private standpoint, but also involvement with museum institutions. JoAnne Northrup is the Executive Director and Chief Curator at the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art. Northrup has an impressive resume of over more than 30 years of a career, which we don't have time to get into all the full accolades, but I do want to mention that she has been a curator at several collecting institutions, including the San Jose Museum of Art and the Nevada Museum of Art as well. In 2017, we had her amazing Jennifer Steinkamp exhibition here at the Kemper Museum, and I also believe I remember seeing it in Savannah at some point. The wreck of the Doomaroo is sort of like burned into my skull. So I remember seeing her impressive curatorial work in so many wonderful locations. JoAnne's also been a fantastic colleague to the Kemper Museum as well. She did an incredible solo exhibition most recently with Shanique Smith called Stargazers. And during the programming for that solo exhibition, we had the opportunity to partner with the Nelson Atkins and with the Nerman Museum to have just a really great series of programs, all surrounding the themes and the performance and all of the wonderful visual aspects that JoAnne had been working on for so long with Shanique. So that's been our most recent kind of collaboration with you, JoAnne. So I will kick things off by kind of just going through a little bit about the 5 Years and Counting exhibition, sort of where this exhibition even came from and some of the ideas. And then I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and I'll ask our panelists a couple of questions that pertain particularly to collecting and their collecting histories. So let me go ahead and share the screen. So looking here, we had a really fantastic last 5 years where we brought works into the museum's collection through numerous avenues. A lot of times we end up collecting works right from our exhibitions. That's such a great way for us to dovetail our planning for exhibitions and how our collecting history is built. We started from a group of works that were part of Beebe and Crosby Kemper's initial collection at the museum, and they had fantastic examples of abstract expressionist work. And when I look at the core of the collection, I really see this kind of amazing history of the gesture. And you can see here a little bit on the right-hand side, one of Rashid Johnson's escape collages. And I think he really delivers a lot of those same aspects that abstract expressionist works had in part of their histories, where there's like a lot of really wonderful visual imagery being layered on top of each other and those expressionistic marks. It also offers us an opportunity to take a deeper dive into some of the artists who've had long histories here in Kansas City and have gone on to do amazing things and come back and really show us what they've been working on. The work straight ahead is by Paul Anthony Smith, and he was celebrating 10 years of working in a picotage process through his photographic process, and we were able to acquire this particular work through purchase of the museum recently. Collecting from our exhibitions has always been something that's been very important to us. This incredible Diani Whitehawk piece, the sculptural work in the center, was created for our exhibition that we had with her a few years ago. It was an incredible solo exhibition. Same with Summer Wheat. She created new work for our exhibitions, the work behind it with all these beautiful colors and watermelon seeds that are kind of pouring in. And we really look to our exhibition history in order to build our permanent collection, but that's not the only way we do things. This is another example. We have had a commission project at the museum for many years now. I think we're in our 8th year. And oftentimes we are able to collect works that come straight from that commission project. So on the left-hand side here, we did a solo exhibition with Angel Otero. On the right-hand side, we had a beautiful series of photographic works by Jody Manaya that we included in the museum's permanent collection recently as well. And that came from one of our commission projects. And then we have these wonderful opportunities and moments of celebration. We were celebrating our 25th anniversary. And one of the iconic artists in the museum's exhibition history has always been Liza Liu. We had an opportunity to show the kitchen and the backyard here at the museum in 1996. And when I first came here, I was really, really excited because that's an exhibition I heard about all the time. And luckily enough, that's an artist that I was very familiar with. At my last job at the Savannah College of Art and Design, I did a major solo exhibition of hers. And so I was just really excited to know that she had such a history here. And one way that I wanted to bridge that history was by acquiring a work in celebration of the museum's anniversary that really spoke to what she was working on now and kind of in the moment. We talk about contemporary language and the way that artists are exploring and expressing the world around them right now. And I think that being able to look at her and her painting style and the interjection of painting into this very kind of collaborative beadwork process work that she's been doing for several years and across continents was a really important aspect to bring into the museum that maybe didn't kind of get resolved during the first part of the period where she was showing at the museum, where her work was considered kind of early on a bit more pop. And this way, it really kind of allowed audiences to see some of the things that she was working on in a more contemporary context. And then Eddie Martinez, this particular painting was an incredible gift to the museum of a recent body of work. And I really thought, I love the way that he's speaking about still life. And in this particular work, he's really looking at floral still lifes. And we have so many wonderful paintings in the museum's collection by Janet Fish, and one of them is a still life with a floral arrangement as well. And I started kind of looking at that thread and how that was presenting itself in the museum's collection, and really thought it was such a wonderful addition. And, aside from that as well, he has such a unique and incredible language that comes from looking towards graffiti work and kind of taking it and moving it into the studio, and how that had a reflection on a painting style that we always think of as so classical and historical. And you know, I really wanted to show that aspect of him, you know, bringing still life into a different and exciting contemporary context. So these two across the room from each other in the exhibition, like really lend themselves to aspects of color and abstraction. Again, abstraction going back to that history in the museum's own collection. And then there's a couple of really beautiful, they're hard to see here, but really shiny, opulent ceramic works by George Timmock, who was a professor at the Kansas City Art Institute and a chair of the ceramic department for many, many, many years. And when I first moved to Kansas City, I really became even more interested in ceramics because the history of ceramics is so rich here. And so one of the ways that I'd like to honor that is by including ceramic works into the museum's collection that really bring a sense of story. We have such a great relationship right next door with the ceramics department at the Art Institute. And we've been really including a lot of important exhibitions at the museum related to ceramics. I love the idea of George coming to us and saying, hey, you know, these two works were from a very particular series that I worked on when I brought students to Hungary over the course of several years during my tenure at the Kansas City Art Institute. And I really learned a new process, and that's kind of what we're celebrating and honoring here. And finally, you know, really looking at kind of the relationship between the gesture not necessarily just being part of that kind of abstract mark making language, but gesture of the body, and also gesture of museums kind of moving into a more contemporary context of collecting. Deborah Dancy, the artist whose work is on the slide on the bottom left-hand corner, farthest to the right. This is a work that was included in our magnetic fields exhibition. And then we also have this amazing, beautiful purple figure background figure work by Amy Sherald. And this was one of her slightly earlier works before her amazing and incredibly important portrait of Michelle Obama. And so we had a really great opportunity to work with her and the portrait collection exhibition. And so after having hosted that exhibition, we turned a really keen eye towards Amy Sherald's work. And it was such a great opportunity for us to collect early on, because we've had such a great joy in speaking about this work in various contexts in exhibitions that we've had throughout the course of at least the last 5 years. And so having had this work with us, we not only can talk about this work in particular, but it gives us an opportunity to share some of the things that she's done that's gotten her to this point where the scale of her work has increased. The number of figures that she's added into her work have also increased. And, you know, I think the visibility of artists is incredibly important as well. The collecting history at the Kemper Museum, which we're diving into on a pretty regular basis in terms of statistics and looking at who we're collecting and how many artists we have in the collection and what the collection really looks like. I think that we've spent a great deal of time thinking about how we can be a good steward to including historically excluded artists into the museum's collection. So many of the artists that you do see in our collection over the past 5 years are women artists and artists of color, and that's been an incredibly important initiative to us at the museum, and we continue to grow that, find out exactly where we're at and where we need to be and where we're going and how we're going to get there are questions that we're asking ourselves all the time. So one of the things I want to start off with is like, how does that happen? Here at the museum, our collecting history started from a private collection, and now we have this incredible collection that's been grown by curators over the last 25 years. And so I want to ask Bill first to get a sense of what has been your collecting role or your collecting history in your role, and can you give us an example of an exciting moment in that history, and or exciting moments, touchstones, particular works where you have felt that this is really this really fits into the history of my collecting.
Thanks, Erin. I think I might be a little bit outmatched here with the head curator at the Kemper, and then a curator director, JoAnne from the Nerman. Before we start, I just want to acknowledge JoAnne. I mean, in a very short period of time, she's already made a huge contribution to our arts community. She's very collaborative and energetic. So welcome to Kansas City, JoAnne. Look, it's hard to say. So I think we first started, I can remember on our honeymoon, one of the first works of arts that we bought was a Caribbean artist in Belize. His name was Walter Castillo. It was a great painting. It was called Happily Ever After. We went to his thatched roof hut, which was his studio, where he was smoking a giant joint, and we picked this painting. I mean, the paint was still drying on it. So that was 25 years ago. I wouldn't really say we started collecting until much later. We started local art fairs, and then I think the big shift was kind of going to international art fairs like Miami Basel and others. I think the fuse that really lit for me was when I kind of reached a point where I wasn't just looking at this as a passion or as something that was philanthropic, but also to look at art as an asset class, and that really like lit a fuse in me. It kind of unleashed the sort of risk-taking part of my background in business, and just kind of the risk-taking of kind of being vulnerable to change and seeing the world differently, and so that was a big then I got involved with art institutions and things like that, and that sort of built on itself. I will say that in the last 5 years, that's been the most prolific part of our collecting history. What you see in a lot of museums today are collections that were really built by collectors, like well over 50%. And but what you also see in museums today is very little diversity. I think the combination of Black and women artists in museums overall is still at about 5%. And so our collecting habits are very, very different, and the last 5 years, it's probably been the most prolific period. 45% of that collection in the last 5 years is women. 55% of it is somewhere from the Black diaspora. About 23% is white, and all the rest is kind of a lot of international artists, some non-binary artists, a lot of LGBTQ artists. And so that's kind of the history. And I threw a few works in here. This first one, Frank Bowling, he lives in London now, was born in 1934. That's really atypical for us because we're going back and sort of collecting a more historical Black artist, which I would love to do, but it isn't what our collection has been. We've really been like living artists that were probably born in the 70s or later. And so this is kind of a step out there where it was a period of time in the last 5 years where there was still an opportunity to get involved in at least owning a work by an artist that was being rediscovered and clearly was going to have get back on the trajectory that he should have been on decades ago. Deborah Roberts, another kind of, in terms of her age, someone a little bit later career, had been practicing for decades, really under-recognized. And when she first came to market here, she was doing these small works on paper. And I can tell you, I chased those everywhere. I bought them from like 5 different locations before they figured out that I was getting more than one. And then later, as she took a very different approach to how she selected galleries and kind of had a bake-off all over the country, and then ended up with a gallery in London. And that's how I eventually acquired a couple of paintings. Zanelli Mahali, you know, a LGBTQ artist that kind of started a career early on by going around and trying to photograph and sort of bring to light and be supportive of gay and transgender people throughout her country. A lot of those people ended up getting targeted afterwards, so it was kind of a sort of backfired, really kind of set her back. And then she sort of jumped into this using herself as the main subject. So a lot of her work is self-portraiture from that point on. That's also somebody that, you know, we chase quickly. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that she started out with these photographs. She was selected for the Venice Biennale in 2019. And then, you know, her career has really morphed where during COVID, you know, she started painting. And then now she's doing bronzes. And so her practice has expanded significantly. I just was lucky enough to be at a luncheon with her in New York a couple of months ago. And so it was a great opportunity to see her. Moving along, you know, a Titus Kaphar, another African-American artist, went to school at Yale. He's lives in New Haven, Connecticut now. He has started his own sort of incubator of the arts, where he is training artists, is creating a residency, is giving them business skills, and he's called it Next Haven, you know, and it's in New Haven, Connecticut. So the idea is, you know, what New Haven should really be next. And you know, a lot of his work deals with incarceration. You see this Dwayne Betts painting that started with what was called the Jerome series, where, you know, his father's named Jerome. He was incarcerated, and he started studying all the Black people that were in prison with the name Jerome, and created this series. And this is a collaboration with Dwayne Betts, who's a poet who was also incarcerated. Devin Shimiyama, it's a queer Black artist, another guy that you know, once I saw his work, it really started following him fast. You know, he mostly does these mixed media works, but you know, the Trayvon Martin incident years ago sort of inspired this series of hoodies. And I think this is a, you know, and occasionally if we can, we'll try to collect in depth, and this is one of those artists that we try to do that with. Next slide, you know, is hey, things happen in weird ways, but you know, you know, being able to have an opportunity to acquire Simone Lee is definitely one of the high points in our collecting history. And also just sort of the natural collisions that take place in the art world. You know, when you are collecting, every now and then you're gonna maybe have a chance to acquire an artist that will blow everyone's mind, and for a lot of different reasons. And that's kind of what's happened with Simone Lee. You know, I originally got exposed, I think, to her work through Catherine Futter when she was at the Nelson. And I spent a lot of time with the gallerist that represented her then, Luring Augustine. And then, you know, this thing happened where she was going to leave her gallery and got picked up by Hauser and Wirth. And there was sort of a moment in time there where there was an opportunity to jump in and get a work that otherwise I'd never, you know, we wouldn't have had that kind of opportunity. And then she did all these projects afterwards, the massive piece on the High Line, and then being picked to represent the United States at the Venice Biennale in 2022 was just a bombshell. And if you went to that exhibition, not only did she have her pavilion in the Giardini, but, you know, in the Arsenale, she had the sculpture that she had built for the High Line, first out of clay and then out of bronze, that, you know, it's monumental. And it was surrounded, you know, by Belkacem Aoun, who was an artist featured in a Kemper exhibition that Erin did several years ago, a Cuban artist. So just a very moving for me to be at that Biennale and kind of experience this, knowing that we have a piece back at home in Kansas City. I got to keep moving here. Another artist we've been really excited about. It's a woman from Uganda. She's a gay Black woman. She had to flee her country because homosexuality is illegal there. She was actually outed by her parents, who were involved in politics, and she literally kind of had to be sort of taken out of the country somehow. And I actually think I've kind of heard that there were a couple of artists, including Kahindi Wiley, that were involved in kind of giving her assistance to get out of the country and get to the United States where she can practice. Now she's got great gallery representation with Stephen Freeman in London and Gordon Robichaud here in the U.S. and she works in wood and ceramics, but kind of a rising star in this sort of contemporary take on traditional African motifs. Tanjeet Adani Jones, another great artist, that now resides in Brooklyn, New York. Sort of, we've got a lot of figurative in our collection, but we do try to toggle between figurative and abstraction. This is a nice combination of both. But I think as time goes on, we'll probably be doing more abstraction, maybe a little less figurative, and moving into some other underrepresented sectors as well. The next one, native or indigenous art is another area that we really want to increase our focus on. I'm also learning about the intersectionality of Native Americans and African Americans, and some of the juxtaposition that took place there. But Rose B. Simpson is another artist that we do anything we can to collect in depth. She's on a reservation just outside of Santa Fe. She was born in 1983, and just a complete badass, for lack of a better word. She can take an entire automobile engine apart piece by piece and put it back together. And she's an incredible sculptor and ceramicist. You're going to be seeing a lot more out of her in the coming years. So that's kind of a cross section, of the last 5 years here, that I think is reflective of the focus that we have on collecting and some of the high points and some of the kind of fairway type works.
Thank you, Bill. I think that it's so exciting to see, after having done the piece by piece exhibition at the Kemper Museum of a selection from your collection, every time that you show me something new, it's something that I hadn't seen before that's part of the collection. So I think it's just as exciting for me to see where it's going, and the ambition of the scale and the media is really, really exciting, and totally in line with the mechanics of what I find so interesting about your collection, which is a lot to do with incredible technique and the elements of an artist piecing parts of their history or parts of media together into various kind of configurations of work. So I want to ask JoAnne the same question. What has been your collecting history as a curator and as the museum leader? And can you also give us some examples of some kind of high points in your collecting history as well?
Sure, Erin, I'm happy to do that. I really have only been at the museum for 16 months, maybe going on 17. And so I had to first start with the people that I like to think of as the patron saints of the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art. And of course, my predecessor, Bruce Hartman, who's the founding executive director and chief curator at the Nerman, who was there for 30 years. And then on the left, Marty and Tony Oppenheimer, who were incredibly important to building the collection that we have today. Could not have done it without them. And many of the masterpieces are thanks to them. And also the Oppenheimer Brothers Foundation. And then last but not least, Mary Davidson Cohen, who's at the top right, who together with her husband supported the museum, and then in 2009 established the first endowment designed for collecting at the Nerman Museum. It's the Barton P. and Mary D. Cohen Art Acquisition Endowment. And that's pretty much where most of my acquisitions come from nowadays. There are some other opportunities, but I am so grateful to all the people in this slide. So then the next slide sort of demonstrates the awesome legacy that I encountered when I got to the Nerman Museum. A 3,000 square foot art gallery in what is now known as the Midwest Trust Center in the mid-90s had a solo exhibition of Kerry James Marshall. That blows my mind. That shows me that collecting works by diverse artists is part of the DNA of the Nerman Museum and part of what attracted me to come to the Nerman. And Bruce and Marty and sorry, it's just Bruce for this one, collected this painting from 1995 entitled Altgeld Gardens by Kerry James Marshall. And it's one of the masterpieces in our collection and something that we really cherish. So next slide is another one of those groundbreaking shows in that cute little art gallery. Dana Schutz in 2004 had her solo show, and that was supported by Marty and Tony Oppenheimer. They purchased the painting on the left for the collection. It's titled Swimming, Smoking, Crying from 2009. And this is a phenomenally important painting, apparently because we get asked to have it, to lend it constantly. And that, I would say, is a sign of success in one's collection, is how many other museums are tracking your collection and how often do they ask to borrow it. So currently, well, last year, the painting was in a show at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. That might have been early this year. And then next year, it's going to a solo show of Dana Schutz's work at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark. And then after that, in the summer, it's going to the Musée d'Art Moderne de Paris in France. And so that is one way where people look at the label and they go, Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art. Huh, I haven't heard of that. And it's like, well, you've heard of our collection, hopefully. So the next slide. So during the pandemic and for a couple of years before he retired, Bruce Hartman kept busy collecting some amazing works. And this is an exhibition called Evocations that some of you might have seen. To the left, it's Patrick Martinez, sold Old Merchant God 2020, and that was collected thanks to the Barton P. and Mary D. Cohen Art Acquisition Endowment. The Norman Acres, that's the next one to the right, Dripping World, and that is thanks to the Jadell Family Foundation that we were able to purchase that. Roberto Lugo, the Kobe urn, which is a big favorite among our visitors. That was thanks to Richard and Gloria Anderson, a couple that purchased that for us. And then finally, Michael Klein Corporation Pudding, that was purchased for us by Alex Schmelzer and Lisa Rotmill. So, so we showed a lot of new works. And then since I've only been around at the Nerman Museum for 16, 17 months, I have actually been collecting. So the next slide, please, Erin. Because I can't resist, and it's both gifts and purchases. On the far left, Jake Troiley, Easy Bucket from 2022. And I figured so I'm told basketball was invented in Kansas. So this was extremely appropriate for our collection, and plus an amazing painting. It was purchased out of the Barton P. and Mary D. Cohen Art Acquisition Endowment. And then the center one, we purchased that, gosh, like maybe last month or October. And that is Dana Claxton, who is a Lakota artist from Canada. This is titled Hip Hop Indian. And it's a huge photograph, 54 by 72. Can't wait to put it on view. And the Jadell Family Foundation supported this acquisition. And then finally, to the right, my beloved Shanique Smith. I was so, her work is possibly out of the reach of the Nerman Museum. And I was elated when earlier this week, I was contacted by Shanique, who a collector couple said, we are planning to give away this painting, possibly for a tax advantage since it's the end of the year. And would you please recommend who should receive it? And Shanique said that we were at the top of her list because we really had a beautiful show that we put on together, Stargazers. And this is titled Rose Colored Times. It's from 2009 and it's 96 by 60 inches. So for those of you who visit the Nerman Museum, you'll see it in our galleries pretty soon. I can tell you that. So that's it.
Thank you so much. You brought up a really good point of where these works go after they've been acquired by the museum. How do you sort of keep works from maybe sitting in storage or not being contextualized in gallery spaces because of space constraints or whatever reasons? And I've been talking with my colleagues a lot too, and we've been using not only the opportunity to travel our works. We traveled one of our Georgia O'Keeffe paintings a year ago to the Pompidou in Paris. And that was a big deal for us because not only did the work travel, and like you said, when people come into the space, they're like, Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas City. Oh, how interesting. Watching people take photographs of this piece in such an iconic museum space was a real moment. And I thought to myself, like, wow, during COVID, it really felt like the extension of the walls of the Kemper Museum were reaching so far beyond the Kemper Museum itself that felt exciting in a different way that it hadn't before. And it reaches on kind of educational levels, lending research levels, like having someone write more about the work that's in your collection seems so important to the scholarship, which is kind of at the root of what a lot of us are interested in. And same for you, Bill, too. I know that a lot of people are interested, I mean, us included, are interested in lending works from your collection. And so I wonder if you both could, before we open the floor to a few questions and wrap it up, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that experience is like and what are some of the intentions you have for the work to kind of leave the walls of the museum and how you see that as a benefit to your collection. Bill, you can go first.
Oh, sorry. Well, we love to share work. We love to get it out. And we've got a lot of work on loan. I probably have 100 works on loan right now, and that's in companies, nonprofits, exhibitions, and we're having a lot of conversations now with people that want us to participate, want to use our collection in either in group shows or in exhibitions. I was in a conversation today. And so that's definitely part of it. I mean, the long range plan is, some of this work will end up in institutions. Some may end up in our own private foundation. And, some will have to sell, because we've got so much invested in it. And so that's sort of the outlook, I think from and then, a big part of it is it's just a tremendous the whole journey for me, and I think for others, is just a personal, it's a source of great personal growth for me, and it's changed the person that I am, and it continues to. And so that's really what it's about. And I think when we think about gifts, we hope to have collected things, that will have cause the institutions who receive it to change. I mean, and so that is definitely part of it.
Well, I would say that mine is slightly different just because we're obviously an academic museum. And one of the things that I love about the Nerman Museum is the fact that we show 400 artworks from our collection. So that's almost 25% throughout campus. And so we have things on display long-term in different buildings across campus, outdoors. We have sculpture, and then we purchase things to fill in those collections. For example, not everything we purchase is costly. I purchased 2 skateboards to add to this small Northwest Coast native collection that we have, specifically because I thought, the 3rd floor of the Rainier Center, that would be great. And then the students are going to notice it and they'll be able to relate to it. So we do that as well. And then I would say that a younger colleague actually pointed this out to me, that sometimes I will collect an artist's work because I think it's really good. And we have in the past few months collected, 2 weeks ago, I purchased a work by Kansas City Art Institute undergrad because I went to the open studios, the end of semester thing. I go, I want that. And so I'm not doing it as an investment, but who knows? I mean, that's how collecting goes, is that you really don't know what's going to happen in the future. So you have to go with what you love in the moment.
It's so important to think about it that way too, because I think it's an investment. It's such an investment for the artists, but also for the students to have a sense of what their community is working on, and then bringing all of these artworks. I've been through the hallways of the Nerman as well, and I have to say, yeah, I had no idea. I started making my way through there, and I'm like, oh wow, this is an opportunity for an entire research project for an art historian here as well. So I think that having the work outside of just the museum walls just opens the work up to so much more dialogue and opportunity. It's such a nice, I think it's such a great gift to give to the students, having come from a academic institution and now being a neighbor of one. I always hope that, or I always really enjoy classroom visits with students, but I always think that, I talk to students years down the road, whether they're interns or whether they're students that have come into the museum, and listening to their stories and reflecting back on how the institutions and the collections here in Kansas City have had that kind of impact is exciting. I think it also ends up being quite exciting for us because we had a class from KU come in and they really wanted to look at some Frankenthalers. And I mean, it's not a bad day when you can bring out a few Helen Frankenthaler paintings into the space and examine them with students under lights and kind of really look at what's going on and the iridescence of some of her palettes and things. And I think it's such a joy to share that experience with communities like this virtually, where we're kind of talking about collecting, but in more intimate situations with students, and we do the best we can with the spaces that we have to work with. But I love the idea of that happening. And then like knowing that, Simone Lee's work at the Venice Biennale is surrounded by Belkis Ayon's work that was here, that was like literally here in the museum just from several years ago, is just it's such a joy watching other curators make those conversations happen. So you can be sparked by these kind of energies. And I think that, the generosity that you have, Bill, in gifting works to institutions so that they can become on view in larger profiles, and lending works to institutions on a regular basis so people could see them. And JoAnne making exhibitions with artists who are just doing incredible things and creating juxtapositions within the museum space that spark a lot of inquiry has been so important for everyone here in Kansas City. So thank you for talking a little bit about, I had a lot more questions, but you know how that goes. I do want to open it up to a few other questions that we have. We have about 9 minutes left. And so if there are any questions that want to pop up, I can go ahead and I'll read those off for us so that we can have a chance to assess them. One question says, Bill mentioned thinking of art as an asset class. How do you approach valuing that asset, and how do you decide when to buy, sell? ?
I could take that offline if you want, but look, let's just say that, it's all somewhat discoverable. I mean, the secondary market, you have auctions, and the primary market, you just have to do your work to understand what the prices are, and the rest in terms of how you determine whether or not you like it as an investment more than something else as an investment. A lot of that's going to be personal taste, but there's a lot of objective things to look at. Are they self-taught? If not, where did they go to school? Who's their gallery? Have they had museum shows? Have they had any kind of shows? Have they had scholarship? Are they getting public reaction? So there's a lot of objective variables to use to assess your own view of it as an investment. I mean, but that's notwithstanding that I think to be a good collector, art's got to speak to you, right? And so but there's a lot of art that speaks to me. So the question becomes, how do you zero in on what you want to prioritize?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, so I'll just continue with my questions then. I think that
Hey, Erin, I just want to add, like on that earlier question, that the one of the great things about art is that it just continues to speak for itself, over decades, right? So it's a form of resource in and of itself, and the great thing about showing art is that everybody brings their own life experience to what they see, and so you learn more about that artwork through other people's eyes. You learn more about those people by the way that they respond to the artwork, and it's just kind of this. And then things happen in inevitably in current events that can change the meaning of a work. So it's just this incredible lifeline of expression and ideas and opportunity to kind of grow and change the way we think about the world.
Definitely. There's a question, JoAnne, for you. What prompts the museum to commission work?
And I see that question comes from my friend Larice Beidel, who is a fashionista. So I would say commissioning a work is more like having something made to order. And then collecting a work that's already made is like buying off the rack. It's not that crude because you could find something that you swoon over that was made by the artist. But I think sometimes you get really exciting work out of commissions, and then occasionally you don't.
Yeah, I have to say, I find that the prompting a commission at the Kemper Museum was an interesting thing. It came a bit twofold. Like our first commission ever was the Frederick James Brown Cafe Sebastien, beautiful history of art in the cafe, if anyone's ever seen it. And then there was no commissions for years and years and years. And I kept looking at the atrium and I was like, well, I mean, I feel like there's such a contingent of people that are coming into the museum and going straight to the cafe for a beautiful lunch and then leaving. And I really wanted to kind of energize that space, but I also wanted to kind of honor that history too. And so I created it as a commission project. And it has turned into such a beautiful project because I actually don't give it a lot of parameters except for the fact that it's a 25 by 25 foot wall. And I found that just through dialogue with artists and giving them opportunities to spend time in Kansas City and explore the things that influence their practice and so forth has just evolved into these projects that have been pretty exciting. So I think that's what prompted that commission. I think there's a lot of different ways. Like, for example, like if there's a big exciting space available and there's a big exciting budget available to commission a project, that could be cool too. That's always a good opportunity. But I think there's a lot of different ways to come at those kind of histories at the museum. Question for, we have 3 minutes. Question for Erin and JoAnne. We enjoy this discussion and insight on collection. Are these differences between collecting international, national, and local art? Are there differences between collecting international, national, and local artists?
Do you want me to say something about that? I would say that Nerman Museum, about 30% of our collection is local artists, and I always look to contextualize my exhibitions with works by local artists. Here's why. Because Kansas City has an amazing artist ecosystem, and not every city does. So you should take full advantage. And then it makes for really fun openings because then the artists invite their friends. But collecting international, that's something that Bill does more than the Nerman Museum. We tend to collect mostly national and then some local.
Mm-hmm. Same. I think that we're collecting a lot of works from our exhibitions, and sometimes we do engage in opportunities where we can show local artists. We do the Women to Watch exhibition every couple of years, which is a fantastic opportunity to, one, just get to know so many women artists, self-identifying women artists from in and around the Kansas City area, but to have several of them included in the exhibition as well has always been a really important exhibition at the museum. We had done a few of the Charlotte Street award exhibitions down at the Crossroads when we had our space there, and one here. So that was a nice opportunity to partner with Charlotte Street and to get to really kind of take a deeper dive into the practice of several local artists. So we've done it that way as well. Always enjoy, such a great community to bring to the museum, and always supporting each other in so many different ways. And so, we also really look at ourselves as an institution that also delivers an opportunity for artists coming out of the Kansas City Art Institute to have a chance to explore artists who are emerging, artists who've had careers for 70 years, artists who like a range of artists and from all over the world who just have different life experiences that can be shared. And I think that's the kind of crux of it, is sharing these opportunities. we have a hard stop tonight at 7, so I'm being very mindful of the time. I wish I could answer everybody's question, but I think that the last one might be sort of like, what's your, if you had a short sentence, what's your advice on people who are getting interested in starting a collection?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, I think, does the work speak to you? That's kind of where it starts, and then sometimes, even if it doesn't, there's also a question of, okay, why is that? What does it mean? Can I change the way that I view it when I understand it better? And then do I come back and all of a sudden now it does speak to me? So that's what I would say.
Perfect.
And then know why you're doing it. Are you, what are you looking for? Is it purely aesthetic? Is it just a hobby? Is it for an investment? Do you care about the size, the color? But think about why.
Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time. And again, I thank everyone for joining us. And I thank everyone who supports the museum. And I really appreciate everybody moving on to the virtual world. Next time we'll see you in person. Please come check us out and see the end of this exhibition, 5 Years and Counting. It'll be up through the holiday and into the beginning of the new year and closing on January 8th. So, and also when you're in Kansas City and you want to make sure your family sees all the wonderful things, go to the Nerman. They have a fantastic collection that I learn a lot from every single time I go. And Bill has gifted a few works to the 5 Years and Counting exhibition. So you can kind of get a little glimpse into his collecting eye at the Kemper Museum as well. So thank you so much for such a great evening. I hope everyone has a really nice weekend, and stay warm and stay healthy, and enjoy the rest of your year.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody joining.